So I just wanted to open up and thank you all for joining us here today. We're just completely humbled by the interest and the participation in launching this new tool. We're very excited by the partnership that we have with RareX and the benefits that it will bring to our community when we think about research. I haven't introduced myself properly. I'm Christina O'Keefe. I'm a board member for the WS Foundation. Many of you might know my name from our social media groups on Facebook. I also have a son. My middle son has WSS, and he was diagnosed at 10 months, and he's about 7 years old. So this is near and dear to my heart and the mission of the foundation, which is to provide education, foster community, and stimulate research to improve the lives of everyone impacted by WSS. And as we think about this project today that we're going to discuss, it really covers those three pillars of education, community, and research. The foundation board of directors recognized, after 5 years of being in existence and what we've been trying to contribute to the WSS community across the world, is we really recognized we needed to take a next step when it came to research. We recognize that there's such a wide spectrum and severity of characteristics or symptoms with WSS. And you see that as, for those of you who are active on the Facebook groups, as additional members join our community, there's such a wide spectrum. So we recognized we really needed a platform or a tool to really help us improve our understanding in documenting all of those characteristics, and really in a comprehensive way. So over the last year, the board of directors with our scientific advisory board, in conversations we've had with peer patient organizations in the US and outside of the US, as well as our researchers that have been active on WSS, we really zeroed in on several options of a platform that could serve this purpose. And through our due diligence and evaluation, we really settled on this partnership with RareX. We saw that they are experts in curating surveys that are aligned with the researchers' needs, what regulators are asking for, but really does this in a comprehensive way to really expand that umbrella of what those characteristics can be. And then we really feel over time, once we kind of gather that information, we can then specialize in certain symptoms as needed. So you'll hear more about research and our initiatives from the WSS Foundation in the coming months, and particularly at our conference, which is, shameless plug here, which is in Baltimore, October 27th through 29th. If you haven't registered, please consider doing so. There will be virtual participation options as well. But we plan to really kind of walk through a lot of our thought process and our planning when it comes to research and building those basic tools that we know are needed around a mouse model, this patient registry, a natural history study, and cell lines. So we're really excited to share more about that in the coming months. But in the meantime today, we really wanted to zero in and launch this new tool in our partnership with RareX. And so I am very excited to introduce Megan O'Boyle with RareX, and she will walk through the details of the tool. But before I do so, I wanted to make sure I recognize all of the village that it took to get us to this point. It took the board of directors at the WS Foundation, our scientific advisory board, and we also tapped several key influencers within our community to help us do a soft launch and really test this. And Tracy Carmichael and Monica Harris were one of those in Canada. So we really appreciated your efforts on that. Allison Sharp in Georgia from the UK. They also were representing our partnership with the UK charity there as well. They are participating. Others included Charlotte Bedford and her daughter Millie. And then we also had Margie Vlek from the Netherlands join us, and Karen Barnes and Allison Barnes in the US. So I really appreciate all of you taking your time and kind of working through the system. I recognize each of them because they can also be subject matter experts based on their experience so far. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to them as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Megan O'Boyle with RareX. She is the patient engagement lead. And Megan, I'll let you introduce yourself and the organization.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. And thank you all for showing up. I have to say, in the early years of my daughter's diagnosis of her rare disease, had there been a webinar about data, I would not have gone. So I commend you all. It doesn't sound like a very exciting or sexy topic, but what I have learned over the years that I've been working in patient-reported data is that this is like a megaphone. Collecting data from caregivers and patients is going to be the single most important way to get awareness of the research community as well as the medical community. So I really commend you all for doing this so early in your foundation's history. I believe my daughter has a rare disease called Wiedemann-Steiner Syndrome, and she's 22 now. And it was probably 20 years into our nonprofit before we started our first data collection. And so I really commend you all for being so forward thinking. And I know you did your due diligence because there was a lot of back and forth between us about what we were going to be able to do for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll show slides. I want to mention that with me today is Tom Hume, who's our Director of Communications, and I'll mention him several times because he's a major part of this, as well as Caitlin, who's also on our communications and marketing team. They will be creating some of the resources that you will be using. And Darlene Donkin is also here. She's on our technology and programming side. So there may be questions that I cannot answer, but she will be able to. So let me go ahead and get these slides started. I will try and go quickly because slides are more boring than questions and answers. And if the host could just allow me to share screen, that would be great. Just tell me when.
Second.
My bad for not checking this right as I came on.
All right, you should be able to now.
Excellent. Great. Can you see the title slide?
Yes.
Great. So essentially today, what we're going to do is talk about who we are, what we're doing, and how this will benefit your community. So first and foremost, RareX is a nonprofit. We were created by several stakeholders from industry, patients, physicians, and researchers that were really frustrated that rare disease treatments were not coming about fast enough. And data collection was identified as one of the major problems. We are a platform that collects data, which we'll talk mostly about today. We'll be able to connect to data somewhere else, whether it's existing data in another study, or maybe down the road, medical records, or down the road apps and such. And we obviously share data. And by that, I mean, we get data out the door to researchers around the world. And when I use the word sharing data, I mean de-identified data. So the data that we share with your organization leaders will be de-identified summary data. The data that researchers will have access to will be de-identified data. Now, when I refer to researchers, I'm not just referring to people at academic universities and institutions and medical centers. Researchers also include those at large pharmaceutical companies and small biotech companies that are working on treatments. So this data is made available at no cost to all types of researchers, which really levels the playing field. RareX does not own this data, nor does any WSS nonprofit or foundation or organization. You, as the participant who enters the data, owns and manages it, hence my beautiful t-shirt. By that, we mean you decide how broadly you're going to share your data or if you're going to put some limitations on it. And that's up to you. And I'll get into that more as the presentation goes on. We don't sell data. We don't sell it to industry. We don't sell it to researchers. We don't sell it to marketing firms. This data is made available through a researcher portal at no cost. And we don't do research and analysis. This is not something that we are going to be publishing from. We will be helping your organization make sure that as much research and analysis can be done. Just to give you an overview, because I can tell you, even when my daughter had been diagnosed for 10 years, I wasn't keyed into what was going on in research, and I didn't understand all the logistics and why it took, anywhere from, 20 to forever years to get treatments. The current model is generally what you see on the left. A researcher in blue needs to know your disease exists. Then they need to know that you have data, and then they have to ask to see it. And then your scientific advisors or your volunteer parents or your scientific director has to decide if that researcher is worthy of having your data or asking you to answer a survey. As you can see, that's a one-off, and that's generally how this is done. RareX is really changing the paradigm here. So on the left here, on the right of your screen, on the left of the oval, you'll see patients from various diseases. There are currently over 10,800 rare diseases that have been identified, and that number is growing. So we are opening RareX to any of those diseases. We are starting in the area of neurodevelopment, which you're familiar with. So any of those diseases can be entering data into RareX, and the researchers can then access that data through one door. This means the researchers can go in and query data based on genetics, based on disease name, or based on symptoms. And where this is super important for us as rare parents and patients is that someone who's never heard of this disease, but goes into this database and queries on symptoms or a collection of symptoms will stumble across diseases they've never heard of, like WSS. And this is really valuable. So this is how one of the many ways that RareX is different from other data collections. So we're fairly new in this world, and so we've asked other groups why they chose us, and this is why your organization chose us after a lot of shopping, to be honest, because they agree that you should own and manage the data. They don't feel the need to control it. They don't feel the need to see identified data. They trust you to make decisions about how to share your data. They also understand that collecting data on all systems of the body is really important. Even diseases like my daughter's that had been around for 20 years really weren't completely characterized. The researchers hadn't asked all the questions, so they only knew about certain symptoms. So we will ask about every system from head to toe, and you will report on every system, despite whether it has anything to do with WSS. If you have a disease or a condition or a symptom based on something you got from your mother, has nothing to do with WSS, you still report on it. And this is important because people have lots of different diseases or several different conditions, and you report all in one place. There is no cost to your organization or any of the other organizations. And this means that you can use the funding that you work so hard to raise, selling t-shirts or doing galas or walks, for other very important research things that Christina mentioned. As I said, there's no cost to researchers. So this really levels the playing field. This isn't, something that's being done and that, pharmaceutical companies can buy it, but researchers can't access it. Your organization understood the importance of structured and standardized surveys. And I don't mean to get in the weeds here, but 12 years ago, when organizations like mine started collecting data from patients, we just got questions and answers from our super smart researchers. We didn't know that those answers wouldn't map to these codes that researchers like to use that makes their analysis easier and better. And by using standardized surveys like RareX does, these answers will map to ways to, they're called research ontologies, these languages and codes that researchers are familiar with. And this makes this data much more attractive, and your organization recognized that. They also appreciate the fact that we, RareX, are in charge of governance, which is kind of a silly word for what it means. Governance of data means everything about how it's collected, how it's recruited, how it's asked, how it's collected, how it's stored, privacy, security, where it's stored, who can access it, and how it gets out the door to those researchers. Is it available to everybody? Is it available to some people? All of that has financial, ethical, and legal implications, and that's on us. And so your organization understood that instead of becoming experts in data security, they could put their time and effort somewhere else and leave that to us. Also, they understand the importance of that slide I showed you where research is streamlined. There'll be more eyes on the data because all of those researchers can go through that one door and query data in any way they want. And they can look across similar diseases with similar symptoms, or they can look at one specific disease. Truly, this will get more eyes on the data from researchers around the world. So what's in it for you? Because frankly, you're tired. You've answered lots of surveys. More than likely, you've never seen where the results of those surveys were. And you're tired because you're a caregiver or you're a patient and you have a lot of things happening in your life. So first and foremost, this data will be returned to you through your organization. So we will give your leaders summaries of de-identified data. This is how many people are in these countries. This is how many people are female. This is the ethnicity of this population. And as next year progresses, we will have more information about symptoms. This percentage of people that answer this question do have seizures or don't have seizures. And I can tell you, some of you may have never met another family with WSS, and certainly your doctors have never had another patient with this in most cases. So it's really great to have this summarized data of where are you compared to everybody else. If you don't answer the surveys, you don't get counted, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. This will make you eligible for participation in studies and clinical trials. It doesn't mean you have to participate. It just means that if you are willing to click the box that you are willing to be contacted about studies, then those researchers going through that door that query the data, if they query something and your de-identified profile comes up, they'll come back to RareX and say, here's a list of the participants we think would be really right for our study. Can you please tell them about our study? And we will then contact you by email, and it will be up to you to then contact the researcher and say, I want to learn more. Maybe I want to participate, maybe I don't. It's a great way to be found for research studies. And all of this is on a global basis. Of course, we're starting in English, but all of this will be on a global basis. That there's going to be studies outside of the US and Canada, and there's going to be drugs developed outside of the US and Canada. So as translations come on, we will be getting more participants from around the world. You have the ability to connect with any other organizations that currently or may in the future exist around WSS if you agree to share your name and email. You don't have to, but there's an opportunity to do that. You can upload, or excuse me, you can update your profile anytime you want. So that means if tomorrow you say, no, I don't have seizures, and 3 months from now you have a seizure, you can go in and change your answer to no, and then to yes. And by that time, we may have a seizure survey, in which case that seizure survey would show up in your profile. The reason this is important is because we have things changing all the time. We make progress, we regress, we have new medications, and often studies are once a year, or in my daughter's natural history, 3 times over 5 years, which it's great to be in a study, but sometimes you forget between that last visit and 12 months later. So we highly recommend that as things change, you log back in and you update this information. This is where you get a history. This is what's called longitudinal data. So when that researcher goes through that door and they query data and they come upon yours, they're not going to see a snapshot of today. They're going to see all the data points that you entered over the years. And this is how you have a history, or what they call a natural history. which I think it should be called progression of disease, but nobody asked me. So you can update your information anytime. You, as we've said, you own it, you manage your data, you decide how it's going to be shared, and you can change your decision. You can share it in a very limited way to start, and then you can decide to share it more broadly. All of this in the end is obviously to speed up development of treatments. So you are just one of 6 diseases that we are launching this month, and you will be one of 30 or 40 diseases already launched. And a year from now, you will be one of hundreds of diseases that will be in RareX, eventually to be thousands. The more diseases we have, the more researchers will be interested, which is very exciting. So at the top, you'll see yourself, and a lot of these other diseases are also neurodevelopmental disorders. That black box underneath is the community page, which Tom and Caitlin, who I mentioned earlier, will create, has created for your community. And that's where you are going to go in and learn more about this. If you have any questions, there's frequently asked questions, there's translations, and from there you can go ahead and join. Once you join, you're going to have the usual enrollment, passwords, validation, and then you're going to have the consent and data sharing, where you decide how you're going to share your data, demographics, regular questions, and then you're going to have this health and development survey. And I like to call it the head to toe survey. Remember, I said how important it is to have all systems of the body. If you say no to a system, no, I don't have pulmonary or lung disease, then that's the end of it. You're not going to get any more questions about it. If you don't have it today and you go back a year later and say, yes, now I have it, then maybe a pulmonary survey will be added to your dashboard. There's some optional surveys like ethnicity and quality of life. And then all of these smaller surveys over here are what we call level 2. These are more specific about the nervous system or the cardiac system or growth and so on. At the bottom of are these researchers. And so they're going to have access to the de-identified data of all of these cancers that you enter. This is that governance that I was talking about before. It really goes from everything from how we wrote the informed consent, and we thought a lot about it, and we want your data to be used very widely for a long time, which means that we didn't lock it down with a lot of rules. It's secure, but it will be able to be used in a lot of broad ways. It also, for those of you outside the United States, especially those of you in Europe, you understand that data regulations are different in every country. Even in Europe, where they have something called GDPR, it's different country by country. So before we do translations, we will make sure that we meet the data regulations in the country where those languages are spoken. That makes us compliant. So what do you need? Let's get started. You need an email address and a password. Note the approved browsers, Google, Apple, and Microsoft Edge. Please don't use Internet Explorer or Mozilla. You don't need a lot of time. You can start and stop, and I'll talk more about that. As I said, you are going to come from the WSS website or their social media to the community page, setting up your account. There's double validation, the patient consent, and the data sharing. I just want to note here, if you are a caregiver of a minor child, you will consent yourself with your data and decide how your data will be shared. And then when you add the child, add patient, you will have to consent for their data and their data sharing. So it is not Groundhog Day. When you see the same document twice, one is for the caregiver, one is for the patient. If you have multiple patients in one family, each patient will have a consent and a data sharing. So one of the studies that you guys may be familiar with is Johns Hopkins. And you also may be familiar with a data collection that was done at Corbs. This was the very first data collection you guys had the foresight to do. So you guys have been really thinking ahead for a long time. This was really useful in having the information about the disease that you have as of today, but it didn't hit everything that was needed. And so RareX will be collecting going forward. I can answer questions as well as Christina about that in the questions and answers. So this is the beautiful front door where you will go to with a link that somebody will put in the chat. You'll notice on the bottom left corner is translate. So this page can be translated to several languages. As of today, September 1st, when you hit get started, you're going to only be in English. In coming months, we will have 3 more languages, Spanish, Portuguese, and I can't promise the third. If one of my team members can tell me, I will. But we expect to have a total of 5 new translations in the coming year. We will continue to add to those. As I said, we have to be global. So before you get to the consent, there's some questions that decide what consent should you have. So this is information about you, your first name, your last name, even if you're not the patient. I'm at least 18 years of age. So that means that you are an adult. And then under here, I acknowledge that I am located in the US, or I acknowledge that I'm outside of the US and that this information is being transmitted to the US. And this is a compliance. This question has to do with data compliance. At the bottom, it says check all that apply. Now, for some diseases, this is really straightforward. There's only patients, and the patient puts in their data. In my daughter's disease, I'm a caregiver, and I enter her as the patient. And even though she's 22, she's not cognitively able to consent. So I, as her guardian, consent on her behalf, decide how her data will be shared, and I answer all her surveys. So you guys are more complicated in a great way. So if you're a parent of an adult, over here in the yellow, who is able to consent for themselves, then that child, that adult child, should enroll themselves. You can sit in the wings because you may know some answers to their medical questions, but it's their account, it's their information, and they're setting it up. If you're entering data of a child that is a minor under the age of 18 in most states, then you will do what I did. You will set yourself up as a caregiver, you will add a patient, you will consent on their behalf, and you will answer the surveys. When they become a person of majority, age 18 in most states, you will get an email instructing you on how to have that adult child transfer this account to themselves. If you are entering, if you have an adult child that is not cognitively able to consent, then as I said, you would do what I did, where you were doing all of the work, but you're a caregiver and you have a patient. If you're entering data as a caregiver of your spouse that may have a mutation, or you may have a mutation, also enter yourself as a patient. And we can give a lot of examples of this at the end where you may have specific examples. But the point here is, at this time, if you have more than one role, indicate it here. Because if you decide to add it later, we have to do that in a background technology way. I don't want to overcomplicate this. If you have questions, we'll hit them at the end. So you guys know the routine. You get the email, create the password, you get the verification code, you enter the verification code, change your password. This is the screen you're going to get on a regular basis when you log back in to update because there's a change, or because you got an email that says, we're so excited, we have a new survey, please log back in. You will hit a terms of use for Matrix. Matrix is the tech platform that RareX sits on. So that's same thing as all your other accounts. You can review it as you scroll down, accept is at the bottom. The informed consent is usually something I complain a lot about in hospitals and in research because they're very long and they've been written by lawyers and they're very scary. And I never have time to read them, so I just trust them and I go to the end and I sign them. That's not ideal. So RareX spent a year making a concerted effort to make this clear, as brief as possible, and written in plain English. It's in questions and answers. So, who's funding this? How long will it be here? Will I get paid? If you want extra answers, you can click on Learn More. This, by all accounts, may take maybe 15 minutes to go through. It's up to you in the privacy of your living room if you want to keep hitting next, 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 and accept. But this is your health data. This is your genetic data. And I want you to feel great about how secure it is and know exactly who does and doesn't get to see it and what is happening with it and what your rights are. You can always leave. Okay, we're at the second to last page of the consent, and we're back to check all that apply. So just careful read your options. You've stated that you may have a rare disease, that you are a patient or a caregiver, a legal authorized representative, and so on. There's an option in both of these places to be a member of someone that has lost a loved one. And if that is the case, that you may also check that box. The next question here is that you're interested in being contacted for studies and clinical trials. Again, this doesn't mean you have to do them. It just means that you'll get an email about them. And the second question is really important because we're going to be adding surveys every few months for a long time, that if you want to be contacted about new surveys, you need to check yes. So I checked yes for both of these. The last page is your name and your signature. If you then do this on behalf of a patient as a caregiver, just note where it says your name versus your child's name. We want to make sure we get that right. So it's on to demographics, which you all are familiar with. I want to say at this time, every survey is optional, but once you enter a survey, every answer is required because skipped answers make for bad data in research. The researchers don't know why you skipped it. Did the doorbell ring? Is it a depressing question? Do you not know the answer? Is it not applicable? So for every survey, all the questions are required, but we tried to give you an out wherever possible. In the demographics, you can say prefer not to answer. And in the medical questions, there is unsure. So this is the initial demographics questions. Here under race and ethnicity, I know for our families outside of the US, these questions and these answer options may seem odd. We actually use the World Health Organization's standardized questions for this. But again, you may choose prefer not to answer. For me, race was white, ethnicity is not Hispanic or Latino. It seems like an odd way to do it. This is how the research community has chosen to ask. You can see under here, estimated household income, and this person has chosen not to answer. I just want to tell you, personally, I've always hated this question until a researcher told me recently why it's asked. The estimated household income is not so Christina can hit you up for money or that we can hit you up for money. None of us are going to do anything with this data. This is so a researcher can look at socioeconomic standing and say, are patients in this socioeconomic standing with this household income more or less likely to be diagnosed early or late, get treatments early or late? And this, when you hear studies about certain populations not getting diagnosed or treated at a certain time, that's where they get that information from. This clinician field is mute, so you don't need to answer it. And then you're going to click on what rare disease you have. Obviously, you do not have FOXP1. You're going to need to scroll all the way down to alphabetical order WSS. Let me go back to that. If you have another condition that might be on this, for instance, Lennox-Gastaut, LGS, you can click on more than one disease. If you have another disease that's not mentioned, you can click other and type it in. This is the data sharing. Remember, you own it. So there's two types of researchers that you can answer to. General researchers, any kind of researchers. They're doing health and medical research and other kinds of research, including age, ethnicity, genetic traits, or just health, medical, and biomedical research. It's your choice. I picked the top one. Most of the people so far in RareX have chosen the top, but this is completely your decision. You have to click a box before you go to the next page. This page, you don't have to click any boxes. You can click one or both or none. I clicked none. The first one says, any researchers that are non-commercial. This means anybody but pharmaceutical companies and biotech. And that's fine, but just know that if a pharmaceutical or biotech company comes into the WSS space and is working on a treatment, your data will not be seen by them. That's your prerogative. The second one is, I only want my data shared with researchers that have gotten IRB or the equivalent of approval. So IRB is Institutional Review Board. Every research institution has one. They are the people that look over the study and say, this is ethically and scientifically sound. And you're welcome to choose this, but I did not, because I'm okay with some math major from Stanford who likes to play in data to look for some sort of pattern who knows nothing about the disease, but may in fact find something that nobody else has found. The other thing where this becomes important is in March of next year, RareX is super excited about having an open science data exchange, kind of like a hackathon, if you know that. And we'll have a lot of de-identified data about neurodevelopmental disorders and a bunch of scientists who want to go in there and see what they can find. This is a very cool, fun event, but there's no IRB around it because the study isn't specific. So that's just one example of somebody that might be doing a study. They're curious about something, but it's not specific, so they don't have IRB approval. The rest of the data sharing questions are to help help inform your leadership. For instance, do you have biospecimens? If so, where are they? Maybe not everybody has, maybe you did a study that nobody else knows about and there's biosamples. It would be great to know that. Would you be willing to give biosamples? In some diseases, everybody's all willing to give blood, and in others, they're like, I'm not interested. It's important before your organization spends money on these types of things for us to be able to say, majority of your families seem to be interested, or I don't think this is going to be worth it. Same thing with medical records. We're not connecting your medical records today, but we hope to be able to offer that someday. If we offer it, is it something that you would want? Your medical records to be connected to your RareX data. But this is not going to magically happen when you click yes. We're just taking a poll. And then other data sources is what other studies were you in? Were you in the study at Johns Hopkins? It would be great for us to understand how many people were in that study, because Johns Hopkins can't tell your organization about that who's in it, because that's private knowledge for them. This is where you can agree to share your name and email. More than likely, the fact that you're on this webinar means that Christina has your name and email, but maybe she doesn't. Maybe you found out about this through social media. It's really important that your nonprofits understand how to get to people outside of social media. So I would encourage you to share your name and email. This doesn't mean your medical information or genetic information is going to be shared with your organization, just your contact information. And finally, it's I will that you want to share your data on a dashboard. Remember when I said that de-identified summary data will be returned to your leadership, and then they're going to return it to you, and then you can bring it to your IEP meeting or to your doctor's office or to your mother-in-law. That's that summary data or chart that's going to show how you compare to other participants. So I highly encourage you to click yes, because then you'll be counted. All right, so if this was me, I've gone in and done all this for me, the caregiver. Now I'm going to add my daughter. So I'm going to hit add patient over here on the left-hand side. Later, when I come back, there's going to be two dashboards, my dashboard and her dashboard. So this is Brad's dashboard. And to open it up, I have to go over here on the right and click on this book. Up here in the left, I know that this is Brittany's profile as caregiver. This is going to matter when you get involved in this and you're answering things and you get interrupted and you log back in 2 months later and you're like, I can't remember where I left off. We'll help you out with that. Again, this is how you can be reminded of whether you're the caregiver or the patient. I'm happy to say that those words are now in yellow, not black. And it shows when it says viewing, that's whose survey you are in. So remember way back on the crazy slide, I said everybody's going to answer the health and development or head to toe survey. So you're going to start here, and for every yes, you're going to later see something called a level 2. This says 15 to 20 minutes. One of your families did it and had 16 yeses, and it took them, I believe, 7 minutes to complete. So these are very conservative estimates. The diagnosis survey is something that is all free text. So if you finish the health and development survey and you say, you know what, I didn't get asked about it enough, I would tell you to then go down to the level 2. I'll show you how to get there. And if you still don't feel like that you've been able to report everything, you can go up to the diagnosis survey and you can put in whatever you want. Other names is just if your name was different on your birth certificate than what you put on your consent. So that's a very limited survey. Race and ethnicity concept survey is something we had to add after our first group of diseases, because we realized their diseases were more prevalent in certain countries or ethnicities. So this is a deeper dive. So if you answered race and ethnicity before and you're like, you know, I'm white and I'm not Hispanic, that's not telling anybody anything. Well, this will. This will ask whether you're from Europe or Asia. It will drill down to what country in Asia. So for some diseases, this is more important than others. This is an example of a question from level 1. Do you have head, face, and neck? I said yes, because my daughter has very slight dysmorphic features. I don't think she does, but the geneticist does. So anyway, I said yes. Eyes or vision? I said no, but I did say yes to ears and hearing. She hears fine, but she got lots of ear infections. So answer yes, no, or unsure. If you answer yes or unsure, you'll go to that level 2. I just want to remind you, it doesn't matter if these questions relate to WSS or something else. This is all about your health. Don't second guess yourself. Toward the end, did you have genetic testing? Why did you have it? Check all that applies, and then please upload your genetic test. This will eventually take you straight to the upload, but I'm going to have to show you how to manually do that. It's super simple. On the left-hand side, under dashboard demographics, there's documents. Click on documents, click on upload, upload from your, so you've scanned your genetic report into your computer, pull that file, label it genetic report, and it will be here. If you have more than one genetic report, my daughter had a karyotype, a microarray, and a sequencing, so she had 3, you can upload all of them. If you're a parent and you have your own genetic report, that needs to be uploaded under your profile. So under viewing, it would have to say your name. And then your child's genetic report would need to be uploaded under their profile. If your spouse had a genetic report done, they will need to upload it. You cannot upload it under yours. You have to upload it under a separate account. They would have to enroll separately. All right, we're at level 2. So up here we have completed. That's where you'll go back someday and change your answers. These are the ones that you have not started. And here are the level 2s. These are a slightly deeper dive into each of those body systems. Again, number of questions, how long it will take. This is an example of level 2 for eyes and vision. You know, unusual movement, difference in size. If you say yes, it says age symptom first appeared and age of diagnosis. It might be the same day. Or in many cases, you talked about it for a long time and the doctor didn't think it was really something to worry about, or I think this is an isolated event. And then bam, 2 years later, you actually get the diagnosis. So don't overthink this, ballpark it. You know, you as a parent or patient, you know, what was your gut? When did you first think that something was happening? Diagnosis would be, when did it end up in a medical record? At the end of every level 2, and this is going to be very applicable for you guys based on what your testers came up with, you scroll to the bottom and say there's additional issues, and then you just type in free text. Now, this may come up with dysautonomia that may not be mentioned in brain and nervous system. So you would add that at the bottom of level 2 brain and nervous system. And again, you'll have ages for diagnoses. If you've got several, you just hit add over here in the right bottom, green, add another issue. Don't overthink it. When in doubt, add it. You're not going to, you're not going to fail the test. Nobody's going to get you in trouble. So 3 months from now, you have a new symptom. I keep using the term seizures because a lot of times people don't have them and then they do. You go back into the health and development survey and you see these 3 dots on the right. You can view it, you can edit it, or you can email it. You would want to hit edit, and then you would go through until you get to the question that's changed, and you would change your no to yes, and then you will get a new survey if we have one. The email is so you can email yourself your own identified data. At the end of every survey, you can hit email, or you can do it at this point. This is your identified data. You can share it any way you want. HIPAA has nothing to do with this. This is you and your data. If you want to share identified data with your doctor, that's up to you. Quality of life. This is our first quality of life survey. It is very popular. It is well vetted. It is well thought of. It was difficult for me because I have a non-speaking child. So for many of the questions, like in the last 7 days, was your child worried? I had to answer unable to answer because of my child's condition. This is a survey that will be important in drug development because they want to know what your quality of life was before your drug and what it is after. But if you have a non-speaking child, I would recommend that you hang out and wait. We have another survey that will be coming up in the future. So we're almost done. How is this different from other studies? This is not one specific institution. This is not one specific country, although we're launching it in the United States. This is the WSS Global Data Collection Program. It's not a 5-year funded program. It's not at the NIH or, King's College. It's for all of the patients in the world with this diagnosis, and it's for a long period of time. But it doesn't replace what was being done at Johns Hopkins or what might be done at King's College or Stanford 5 years from now. This is complementary to other research. So I encourage you to consider other research if you want to be participant in it. This is different than a lot of research because usually most research is about one disease at one place. As I showed you, we can have any rare diseases in here, and that allows for cross-disease research. So for instance, in our current 30 groups, if somebody were to query autism, communications problems, low muscle tone, earaches, and seizures, they would find participants from almost every disease that is in Rare X currently, because those are very common symptoms, and a lot of those diseases have it. Where that becomes very important is sometimes treatments are not for diseases, they're for symptoms, like epilepsy, or like short stature or pain. So that's how this is different. We are returning that data back to your community so they can return it to you. We are focusing on data that is about drug development. Even burden and disease and quality of life, this is all about drug development. Christina, I just noticed the time, so I'm going to pop forward. We highly encourage you to enroll as soon as you can and answer all the surveys, because there's a family conference in October, and everybody who is in and has answered their surveys by October 10th will be in the slide presentation at that conference. So if you want your symptoms, your quality of life, your day-to-day life to be included in that presentation, then please enroll as soon as possible and answer all the surveys. That is what I mean when I said you need to be counted. We're going to need time to pull that data, so it can't wait until the day of the conference. You have to be in by October 10th. My apologies for going so slowly. I can stay a bit longer, but I know a lot of you can't. So Christina, you manage the questions.
Yeah, I'll jump right into it, and I'll just make a note. In October with our conference, that will be the first opportunity that we will be able to share back the results of the data. So the more of you that are able to participate, the more robust and rich that data set will be, which will also get itself in front of many of the researchers that we have participating at the conference as well. Megan, I first, before we stop recording, I wanted to also acknowledge we have actually one of our prominent researchers on the line, Dr. Wendy Jones, who is a genetic doctor and consultant with the Great Ormond Street Hospital in the UK. I know she's juggling a couple, oh, she did reveal herself there on video, so good to see you, Dr. Jones. She had a couple questions for you that I think are kind of general in nature, and Wendy, I'm happy to, okay, great. And if you could repeat those, Megan, just for the benefit of the recording, I think that would be helpful.
So how do you collect and store molecular results? And I would say we are encouraging everyone that has a genetic report to upload it. How do you confirm an individual is confirmed to definitely have WSS? That would be through the genetic report. And do you reconsent young people when they become adults and the parents previously consented? Yes, we're setting up the system so that the parent will be notified like at 8, when the child is age 17, they'll know that they have 12 months to get their child to create their own account if their child is cognitively able to consent. Back to the genetic report, it's full of identifiers. So you're going to upload your genetic report or reports, and we have a genetic curation process where our genetic counselors take the information from that report and they manually put it into a genetic curation survey. So reports look different from country to country and lab to lab, but they have the same essential important information. That information goes into the genetic survey so that your symptoms and your genetics sit next to each other. When the researchers see that de-identified data, they have both. I will tell you all now that in my daughter's registry that I was in charge of for 10 years, we had 1,400 families enrolled, 630 had genetic reports, and none of the researchers wanted the data on the families that didn't have genetic reports. That was about our disease, but I will tell you, many researchers, especially in this day and age where people are self-identifying with a disease, need and want to see that genetic report, especially in drug development. So if you don't know where it is, go find it. If you need help finding it, contact Christina and we'll help her with ways to get in touch with labs. Dr. Jones, does that answer?
Yes, that was very, if you can hear me very well. But yeah, no, that was very clear. Thank you very much. And yeah, I think the molecular side of things is quite tricky. And I guess the tricky thing is as well that everyone has their own different change in the gene often. So I guess it's yeah, around sort of making sure that doesn't identify people, I guess, as well. But no, I think it sounds very impressive that you've got counsellors looking at the molecular reports. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you for joining us.
One more general question for you, Megan, is how frequently will data be shared by the WSS Foundation? What's been your experience working with other patient organizations on that front?
So we're early in the process, and right now we are not encouraging people to send their researchers to the data because there's not enough data in. So we're going to try and get you all to a point where you have enough data to be of interest to researchers, and then we're going to have them come look at the data. In the meantime, if we need to pull it, like for the conference, we will do it manually. In terms of how often Christina has access, once she receives ethics training, which she will have to do in order to see de-identified data for you, she can post it as frequently where she wants. Currently, she's only going to get some very general information. How many are enrolled? What month did they enroll? What country are they from? As the months go on, she will start to have access to a dashboard, an admin dashboard that will have more about percentage of symptoms.
And we'll communicate more of that, kind of the plans from the foundation on the use of the data set at the conference. Megan, one final general question is, who qualifies as a researcher? Could a patient or one of their doctors register with RareX to access the raw de-identified data?
So we do have access for what's called citizen scientists, and I have not accessed the data, so I can't get into the details, but there is a way to go to the research portal once we open it up, and there will be criteria that you have to meet. And I believe that if you're not a researcher at an institution, which means that if you have bad behavior, you get in trouble, that you will have access, but in a more limited way. So I can get more information on that and share it with Christina down the road. I think what physicians don't have a lot of time to do research, what they want is to see the data that comes out of the research that's done with the data. That's generally how it works.
Great. And Megan, one additional final, we got a couple of our key influencers who helped us with the soft launch and testing. Candace Matthews and Allison Sharp and her daughter, Georgia, they noted that they were receiving maybe technical errors. It wasn't allowing them to complete the level 2. It was saying failed to upload. So if any of our other families encounter that, what should they do?
So I would like them to contact you or contact support at rarex.org. And if somebody could put that in, Caitlin or Tom, because it's rare-x.org, that will go to our tech team. I would also like you to copy Christina on it, not to fill her email box, but I want her to be able to gauge what your community is feeling so she can report back to me. If you're doing it on a mobile device, and I failed to say this is built for mobile devices like phones and tablets, but level 2 is not friendly on a mobile device at this time. So I would say go ahead and enroll and do your consent and all of that. But as you get into the more detailed surveys, I would try and do it on a laptop or computer. I believe Darlene is on this call right now, and she will be the one that will be receiving the support at rarex.org. The more detail you can give, your name, your email, the browser that you used, and the device that you were using will help her troubleshoot much faster. And my apologies to anybody that's having technical issues. I know one of the teams had issues with saving, and I forgot to show that. In the top right-hand corner, there's a big red X. If you're going to leave and you know it, if you hit the red X, it will allow you to save. But every time you're in a survey and you hit next, everything before that next is automatically saved. So I think that the person that reported back to us, Christina, will have to, I've already reported to our tech team, but everything should automatically save once you hit next. You don't have to finish the whole survey. And if in doubt, go up to the red X in the right-hand corner of your screen.
Wonderful. And I'm sure the response rate from RareX directly is good, but I'm happy to advocate on behalf of any of you to pester Megan and her team to get
Well, we think it's important that you as a client understand, what your community is feeling, and the same thing, I'd rather them come to you and us at RareX than be frustrated and go on social media and confuse the community. So we want to hear your feedback. It's early in our every month we do updates. We change words to make them more clear. We change workflows to make them easier. So we really appreciate the feedback. So don't be shy.
And Megan, really quickly, regarding that level 2, people not automatically getting to level 2, we've even seen in chat here, some people find if they log back out, log back in, that they are starting to see the level 2 surveys. So that's another thing to give a try if you don't see you're getting right to the level 2 survey.
Thanks, Tom. I had forgot, I did this so long ago, I forgot that was one of the troubleshooting.
Well, with that, Megan, I think any additional questions are more in personal nature. So we're going to go ahead and stop recording. It is also at the top of the hour, so we're at our limit. So if anybody needs to jump off, which I know some of you have, please feel free to do so. We are now opening it up to additional questions, either if you want to put it in the chat or raise your hand to ask the RareX team. And Megan, there is a question here.